All right, we're live. It's the Dr. Kris Life podcast, video, live stream, all the things that two guys can do. Dr. Kris, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Doing well, man. That hair is just coming. You just looking more. Pretty soon, what's the guy that's on all the romance novels?
Like Fabio?
Yeah, pretty soon you're going to be Fabio.
Well, and believe it or not, I had a touch-up procedure last week, and you can't hardly tell. You can, and so for those patients that are worried about it, I did a neografting last week, and today's my first day without wearing a cap to work.
Yeah, so I'm jealous, obviously. And last week I learned on our conversation that I have what's called alopecia totalis.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know there was a name for just being bald.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately there is.
All right, so I'm going to roll the intro, and then we're going to talk about the tips for staying on top of your health as you age. Here we go. If you're like most folks Dr. Kris Fusterhausen works with, you're active, you want to take ownership of your health, and you want to age gracefully. The problem is there is so much conflicting information out there about health and wellness, it's tough to know who to trust. Most providers are limited by what insurance will approve, so it can seem like they're only able to help you manage your health decline with more meds. On the Dr. Kris Life Podcast, you'll learn how you can regain your confidence in your health journey. You'll learn helpful knowledge about programs, supplements, peptides, and hormones that Dr. Kris has used with thousands of patients just like you to help them crush their goals and be their best selves. So if you're ready to take charge of your health and are wanting to stay active and healthy so you can be a better parent, partner, or lover, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dr. Kris Podcast. You're in the right place if you want to sit in a tub with your house coat on and a glass of wine.
Do you know that's exactly what I was about to say is why are they in that bathtub? It just is so weird to me in robes drinking wine. I don't know. But okay. It's so funny that's where you went with it because I was going to make a joke about it. So.
That's funny. Yeah, you spill that wine on your white bathrobe and never come out.
You're in your fancy Four Seasons robe there drinking wine in a bathtub. Okay, good for them. They looked happy, so that's all that matters, right?
Yep. All right, today's episode is tips for staying on top of your health as you age. And I think, we're a good subject matter here as you and I, as we're confronting these things, as we're working on it. And that's how you and I got connected. Obviously, you're a client, but I'm also one of your patients, and I take advantage of a lot of this stuff, and it's really helped me, these conversations. I've noticed that my lifestyle has changed in many ways just because I talk with you often, and that's the whole point of these conversations that we're recording and live streaming as well.
Yeah, and this is a complex topic that doesn't have to be quite as complex as maybe it seems off the top. Like, I don't know about you. I don't know if you saw like Toby Keith passed away last night, and I was like, dang, like Toby Keith wasn't that much older than you or I. And so that kind of starts bringing all of our own mortalities into focus, right? Because we're not on this earth for the rest of eternity for sure. And of course, he died from cancer, which we can talk a little bit about maybe some things that can be done there. But it makes you start looking at your own health and what can you do differently. And as we've stated on this podcast many times, my health journey really started in earnest at 34 years old because I was overweight, not feeling good. An overworked family practice physician that wasn't taking care of himself and decided that I had to shift my focus because I am a big believer. If you don't take care, I tell caretakers this all the time. And you and I have had this discussion, because you've had a moment in time where you were a caretaker, is that if you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of others. And that's kind of the mantra. I personally do better jobs of it at times than I do, all the time. But I try to tell myself it's important that I do the things to keep myself healthy because ultimately that's what keeps this all going. So yeah, it's a great topic that we can dive into for sure.
Everybody's looking for that one thing, that one easy button. But the truth is there's not one thing that you can do. There's a system of things that you can start to make little improvements that over the long term really do make a big improvement. And I think that's part of this conversation is what are the things that we can start addressing? The folks that listen to this podcast or this conversation are folks that want to take control. They do want to take ownership and they want to work with someone like you to do better. But that means that we're changing certain things about our lifestyle.
Yeah. And like last night, I was talking to a doc who called me, who's actually got me into this business. And we were just talking about patients and how some patients really absorb everything you say like a sponge, and some are kind of water repellent. They don't really take any of your advice and use it. And most patients are kind of somewhere in between, right? And there's no one answer to any solution. There's no one thing that fixes our health as we age for everyone. It's a global attack on staying healthy. And one of the big things I struggle with that I talk to other providers about is there's so many tips, so many different things that we can do. Even me personally, like what all do I do for myself? Because if you did everything that you could possibly do, you'd never get any work done. You'd be constantly taking a supplement or a peptide or a hormone or exercising. So you have to work things into your routine that really works for the person. But, I always say there's some really easy ways to look at life, to health, excuse me. And I think intermittent fasting is, I tell everybody, if there's one tip that you're going to take from me that costs nothing, actually saves you money, because if you're fasting, you're not eating, and that's saving you money. That's for your health. It's intermittent fasting. Nearly everyone can do it. I always say if you're a non-insulin diabetics, you need to be careful with, especially insulin using diabetics. But if you're not in that category, it's hard for me to come up with a reason why you can't do intermittent fasting. And it does so many positive things for our body. It's how we allow ourselves to repair properly, metabolize fat efficiently, perform athletically better, perform mentally better. And I still can't think of a person that I've ever talked into fasting that did fasting that came back to me a month or two later that didn't say it did not have a positive impact on their life. And usually if I can get somebody fasting for a month or so, they're hooked. They're going to be long time fasters. Simply going to your doctor, having these candid conversations, looking at advanced lab metrics, seeing where you stand. Like, it's so sad. I used to, I've said this on this podcast before, but I feel really guilty about the kind of medicine that I performed early on in my career. Of course, I was doing what I was taught, so I do always use that caveat. I just didn't know better. But it was ignorance on my part, because I would just all of a sudden get an A1C on somebody and go, "Oh, you're diabetic. Wow, where'd that come from? Didn't see that curveball coming." When now, we can predict these things if we're doing the right labs years in advance, so that we can make simple changes to fix these things. Because I believe probably the biggest thing that wrecks a person's health is adding visceral fat. I had this saying on this podcast that if I could take a patient sight unseen off of great labs or a perfect body scan, I'll take the body scan, because you can alter labs with medications. It's very rare I have a person with a perfect body scan who has a lot of health issues. So if I want the patient that's going to be easiest on my brain, I'm going to take that perfect body scan, because that visceral fat just wrecks us. It leads to inflammation, which leads to chronic diseases. What chronic disease I get will be different than what Steve gets, because there's genetics that plays into that. There's just different factors, environmental factors that play into why does one person get cancer and another person gets Alzheimer's disease. But it all starts with that inflammation. We can certainly keep a grasp on and keep a handle of, for sure.
I think about the terms that we use when we talk about this. So, we go through life, we're kind of programmed in some ways to have a perspective or an opinion about a certain term. So when you say fasting, people are like amazed that someone can fast. They don't really give themselves credit that they can do it. But what that picture is of fasting to them may be 40 days out in a desert when it's just like, hey, you'd stop eating at 8 and you don't eat again until noon the next day, and you slept through most of that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's our most simplistic form. That's it. 16 hours of intermittent fasting. I try to talk my patients into 5 times a week, Monday through Friday, if you have a normal schedule, and you don't have to do it on the weekends. And for our beginner fasters, yeah, that's it. And it's simple. And you sleep through half of it, like you already said. If you sleep 7, 8 hours, well, that's half the time. And patients think of fasting, like just after midnight till I get to my doctor's office to get my blood drawn. That's how they think of fasting. And if you do fasting only once every now and then, it is painful. It sucks. You're hungry. Your body's not used to that routine. Our bodies will sync with our routines very quickly. I always tell everybody, if you can give me 2 weeks of fasting, you'll be over the hump. You'll be fine. Most people are over it much quicker than that, 5 or 6 days into it. First few days can be rough. That's okay. Like, let's say you don't make it to 16 hours the first few days. Okay, fine, eat. And then the next day, let's go for 30 more minutes until we meet that, 16-hour minimum time. My advanced fasters will really change it up. I've been kind of lazy lately. I try to do 48-hour fast occasionally. I haven't done one. I was thinking about, I bet it's been summer since I've done one. So I really probably need to do a 48-hour fast. They're not that bad once you kind of get used to them. I'm not going to pull the naked and afraid thing, go out on somewhere for 20 days and 20 nights without eating. I'm not going that far. But fasting should never, I tell patients all the time, fasting should never feel punitive or painful. That's not what fasting is meant to be. It's meant to be a health hack that really, really is effective. So that's always my first tip to everybody. Like, hey, you want something that doesn't require me, that's free, that saves you money at the end of the day, work in fasting. The second step would be, are you exercising? We're meant to be in motion. We're not sedentary creatures, but yet most of us live sedentary lives. Look at you and I sitting here right now. We need to do this podcast while we're walking or something. Yeah. That would be something. But lots of us, including myself, have somewhat sedentary type jobs. I get up and walk from one room to the next, but that's not much. I'm not like the guy who's out roofing a house and is, really, really working, manual labor every day. So it's important that I get that exercise, get that movement in. Why do a lot of people retire and then die? Because they retire. Like I tell my patients all the time, don't retire if retirement equals sitting on a couch staring at the wall. I mean, you're going to die. You're going to die quickly. We need to be moving at all times, keeping that brain active, keeping that body active. And also I think that so many Americans, especially females, have been improperly trained on what exercise looks like as we age. I feel like everybody has been taught that the more time we can spend on a treadmill, the healthier we will be, which that's bullshit. Our patients need to be resistance training. It's all about muscle mass. And so, we talk about on this podcast a lot, sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is your medical term for loss of muscle mass as we age. And how do you combat sarcopenia? Well, the biggest way you combat it is proper nutrition and resistance training. You have to put those muscles under resistance. I don't need, there's a lot of people that I train with, they have the hashtag, women lift. And that is because women should lift. They don't have to live. My wife does not need to lift the same weight, that I lift, but she needs to be lifting. She needs to be doing resistance training. That can simply be a box of bands that you buy at Academy for $40 and body weight exercises like push-ups and sit-ups, but we need to do those things. So improper exercise is a big problem. So many women have just been ingrained into them that they must cardio, when actually what they're doing is burning more muscle. I'm not saying don't do cardio, but don't do it at the expense of not doing your resistance training.
Yeah, I think of the concepts that the little things that you can kind of get in your head that help you. They have big levers that make a big improvement over your perspective and give you the will or the conviction to make the changes that you're talking about, like going some time without eating, doing things that's not like in my nature. I really got to talk myself into going and doing those resistant exercises, right? And then I think one thing that was kind of big for me is that it's called android fat that goes around your tummy. Is that, and when you think about it, all around your organs, when I got that picture in my head, it's like, oh, that gave me the conviction to do more, because that's where all my fat starts, right?
Yeah, the visceral fat. Yeah. Yeah, well, and you get a lot of people in my practice that come in and we scan them, with our in-body, and their body fat's not that bad, but everywhere they're putting it is viscerally. Okay. And, like I say, those patients, we're going to have to get you to a fairly low body fat because we must get rid of that visceral fat. Of course, if you're heavily overweight, most likely you have a lot of visceral fat. That's just, you can only put it in so many places. But a lot of patients are surprised. Guys come in and their body fat, normal's 15 to 20. We'd like under 15, but 15 to 20 is normal. They might be only 21, 22% body fat, not crazy elevated, but, a tremendously high visceral fat. And the good news is A, we can measure these things these days. We can track these things these days, and we know how to get rid of these things these days. So, when we approach this topic, I would say it's kind of like baking a cake. Pardon the bad pun, because we're anti-eating cake, of course, for this. But we can have a 1-layer cake, a 2-layer cake, all the way up to a 30-layer cake if we choose to. So I always think fasting and movement is the bottom layer. The second layer as we ages is looking at those hormonal values and seeing if we need hormone replacement, looking at those metrics, seeing if there's any insulin resistance that we need to address. As we know, insulin resistance is what leads to diabetes. Looking at that, correcting that. We've had ample podcasts talking about how we can correct hormonal imbalances. Then you start layering up with your supplements. Everybody needs vitamin D. I mean, it's rare that I ever see good vitamin D. Vitamin D is so important for our bones and joints, immune system, and mood. And, also making sure we're taking care of those supplements for immune system like zinc and, vitamin C and all those things that are important for our immune system. Looking at B complex vitamins. So, there was a stat that I saw one time that the average American adult spends well over nearly $200 a month on supplements, per person. But most of the time they're doing that without any form of guidance from an actual provider. They're just going to the health food store, and, Jennifer that works at the health food store recommends something, they start taking it, or their friend Becky takes this, so they take it. So one thing I always encourage my providers is actually talk to your patients about their supplements, because they're going to take them regardless. Stats already show that. So let's at least help them, guide them in what's really good, use that money effectively. And then we start getting into possibly peptides and things like that, depending on what a person needs. Maybe we have found that insulin resistance and we need to go after that. What's a great way to go after insulin resistance? GLP-1s, like you and I always talk about, the semaglutide and the tirzepatides of the world. The discussion I was telling you about the doctor last night, he was also commenting on how GLP-1s have been a complete game changer for his practice. He's now got these patients. And I agree, I concur with him that we have these patients that diet and exercise and hormones alone just aren't doing the trick. For whatever reason, the patient doesn't have the compliance or the ability for their body to readapt back to what we need. You put them on these GLP-1s and it's a freaking game changer. You see these insulin levels dropping. You see this visceral fat going away very rapidly. Patients are re-engaging into their own health, because there's not a person out there that doesn't start to look better and feel better, that doesn't become more engaged in their own health, because so many patients, I think, feel hopeless. They don't want to admit it, but they just feel like this is it. I can't do any better. I've tried the diet. I've tried to exercise. Nothing works. I've tried this pill, this supplement, that supplement, and nothing frickin' works. But GLP-1 swoop in and they actually fix these people. And he even made a comment, which I completely agree with. It has reinvigorated myself into my practice. In other words, he's re-engaged more because he's seeing that. Because trust me, I understand that patients, when they don't have success, they're the least happy of everyone. But if your provider really cares, they're upset too. I mean, I'm putting effort into this too. You're trusting me to help you with your health. And when you're not improving, it's just as, I always say, not as frustrating to them, but it's pretty damn close, because nothing makes me happier than when I see true change in my patients, labs, body scans, but more importantly, how they feel, how they do. I mean, some of our patients come in and, the first time you see them, they're just grumpy and they're not happy. And then they come in, they're just smiling ear to ear. I learned sometimes they come in and I look at their stuff usually before I go in the room and I'm happy, but not ecstatic. Like, golly, I would have wished this would have been a little better. And you go in the room and they're ecstatic. And you got to remember, okay, they're happy with their changes. They're changing. That's all that matters at the end of the day. So what if it takes 3 more months than you wanted it to take? As long as your patients are happy and they're improving, that's what's important. So, this process to health or to wellness is a long, winding course. It can go multiple different ways. It's different for every person. But the key is just having someone that and I tell my patients all the time, if you're not comfortable with me, if I don't fit the bill for you, that's fine. Find somebody that does. Hell, I can refer them to other people. I work with a lot of people that have different personalities that attack things differently than I do. As long as you're just with someone that cares, that you feel comfortable with, that you trust. I think that's the biggest thing is I need my patients to trust what I'm telling them.
When I was going through this process, my first set of labs, I had all these reds.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? Yellows and then green, or there was, and those reds shocked me that I had so many reds.
Right.
But over time, I saw the reds go away, or mini reds reduced to yellow and then to green, to where I just had this one that was sticking on there, and it was my pancreas. And you talk about insulin resistance, that, my pancreas was still working too hard. And that was the thing that really convinced me to change my look at my diet differently, to give it a rest.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it breaks down, then you have a lot of problems about to happen. And it's like a little warning.
Yeah, go back to fasting again. Like, what's a great way to go about that? When people underestimate the amount of effort it takes our body to digest things. And when you're constantly, like the average American, eating from sun up to sundown, reasonably so, they're eating all day long, snacking, eating meals. That's causing your body to be in a state of digestion pretty much all the time. And the foods that we eat in America, because most people who are eating frequently aren't eating healthy. So they're eating carb-rich, sugar-rich foods. So your insulin level is remaining high because it's got to break down those sugars. Because let's back up. What does insulin do? Breaks down sugar in our body. It is a peptide that breaks down sugar in our body. So if we're constantly eating, even if we're eating pretty good but not perfect, you're going to have constant high insulin levels. And as I say on this podcast, I'm into simple sayings. Insulin is up, metabolism is down. It's that simple. Okay. You don't have high insulin, high metabolism at the same time. And think of it like a lever system. One goes up, one comes down, or like a scale. So when we're fasting and we're not eating all the time, if we're not hyperinsulinemic, in other words, we're not insulin resistant, then you're allowing these insulin levels to fall to really low levels, which guess what that does in turn? Allows the lever of metabolism to go up so that we're burning calories more efficiently. But when we fast routinely, because our bodies want to use fat for fuel even though it's the most efficient fuel we have, it wants to use it very, very last resort-ish. So when we fast routinely, there's a reason why, I always tell patients, even though it's 2024 and there's an H-E-B or Kroger or Albertsons on every corner of every major town, wherever you live, whatever grocery store, our body wants to hold on to that fat because it thinks Steve may not be able to kill a pig for 2 weeks and he's going to have to exist on a handful of berries. Okay. So it wants to put fat in places and hold on to that fat. And if you're female, for reproductive reasons, it wants to do it even more because, it's trying to protect our females. And so it's just really important that we put it in a fasted state. So we're forcing that body to use fat for fuel and make that fatty acid metabolism efficient again and go back to eating like we were supposed to. which is less frequently, large, maybe a little bit bigger portions less frequently than small portions multiple times a day. Because that is what I used to teach: six small meals a day. Again, we learn things, and now we know that that's not the case. Let's be in a fasted state more frequently. Things like Alka-Seltzer Gold is a nice little tip. Sodium bicarb. We like Alka-Seltzer Gold, which you can only get on Amazon because it's less messy than trying to pour baking soda into your bottle of water. That's a great way to, actually push base into your intracellular contents inside those cells, because our body becomes naturally acidic. Our diet is naturally acidic. We want to have more base in our life because that's actually balancing out our cells, and that's where it wants to live. That's where it's more efficient. So something as simple as 2 tablets of Alka-Seltzer Gold once or twice a day can make an amazing wellness difference. So there's so many of these little things that we can throw out there, but I really think it just kind of starts with matching your lifestyle up with a provider that feels the same, that's going to have an interest in that, and maybe has time for that. I mean, again, I always tell the story: when I did traditional medicine, I had 12 minutes per patient. I didn't have time to talk about these things. I mean, still today, even though I normally spend 30 minutes with patients to an hour, I still create these podcasts so I can say, go back to episode 34 and, listen to that podcast, because I don't have 45 minutes to talk about fasting or hormones or whatever. So,
the big thing that made a lot of sense to me is that our brain wants to use fat for fuel. It helps you sleep better. It helps you think more clearly. It's a better fuel for you. And when you think about fasting and what it does, it helps you sleep better. It helps you have more energy, and then it gives your cells time to clean house.
Yeah, just for your body to repair in general. You were talking about your pancreas, giving your pancreas time to rest. Not running it. Obviously I'm a guy. I love analogies like cars or machines. And I always tell my guy patients, and I can tell my girl patients too this, they'll relate. But if I have a water pump and I'm running it at too high of RPMs to pump water from one body of water to another, that's fine for a little while. But eventually, if I run an engine at too high of an RPM, chances are breakage will occur at some point, whether that's 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, a decade. It's going to happen at some point. Our bodies are really no different than that. If we are running our pancreas harder than we should, if we're running our kidneys harder than we should, our heart, if we can go back to thinking that simplistic, it makes these complex topics not so complex anymore, because we just want our bodies to function as easily and freely as possible. How do we do that? How do we not stress and strain our bodies as much? Alcohol, that's another one. We went through that phase where, a couple of drinks a day is good, and by the way, do I drink? Yes. Do I drink much? No. Do I believe drinking is healthy? No. I don't believe alcohol is any actual health benefit, because I think there's just too many negatives that go with it. Alcohol causes inflammation. Alcohol causes us to change our diet. Very few of us going to have a couple glasses of wine and we're still going to keep our diet, between the lanes. We start feeling a little loosey-goosey, so goes the diet. Most people who only drink a drink or two a day every day, it doesn't stay a drink or two every day long term, and ends up at some point turn into 2 or 3 or 4, and then you get a problem on your hands. I tell people all the time, weight loss and alcohol use do not go hand in hand. So I encourage my patients all the time, give me 30 days without alcohol, because some of this stuff, if you're not willing to do it, then I can't help you. Like my biggest pet peeve, I'm deep in the Dr. Pepper's capital of Texas. If you can't give up soda, for your health, then how much can I really help you? Because I don't think anybody that drinks Dr. Pepper or whatever soda you pick believes it has any health benefit to it. Right. And so we have to, as we age, we have to look at these things that I think are simple things to change, and get them out of our lives so that we can do better.
So which peptide treatments do you start to think about when you're talking with patients that are over 40?
So obviously that could go any direction, but I'm going to talk in very much generalities right now. But BPC is always a great one to think about. It just, first of all, has no known side effects. We have an OTC form, over the counter form. You don't even have to be my patient to take oral BPC. We see BPC as a wellness peptide. It also does an amazing job of slowing down or altering neural degeneration in the brain. Obviously, gut health is gut health is everything. And we didn't even go down the gut health pathway because that's a topic all on its own. And we've done a pod, so refer back to that podcast. But gut health is everything when it comes to our wellness. And BPC is, it's made in the gastric juices of our stomach. It depletes with age. It does such a good job of helping our gut health overall. And then just, gosh, I don't know about you, Steve, but, as we age, things start to not feel quite as good. Joints hurt, ligaments hurt. You work out and things, my trainer back here at my gym, he's a couple years behind me, but it's funny. He's starting to complain about this hurting and that hurting. And I'm like, yeah, man, welcome to the late 40s. It starts to happen, but BPC can do an amazing job with helping that. So I think if there was a peptide to start with on nearly anybody, it's probably BPC, because there's no one that can't take it, and it doesn't have any side effects. This is just an amazing way to go. And then, really simply, we can start looking at those immune modulation for patients, and start thinking about your thymosin-based peptides like thymosin beta 4, TA1, thymosin alpha 1. Those are great peptides to look at immune modulation. We always use the term modulation because we're not trying to make your immune system hyperactive. I always say I want it to be like a Lamborghini. When I need it, it's going to hit the pedal. It's going to do the job. I'm going to win the race and then back to idling mode, So I don't want it operating at 8,000 RPMs all the time. So we use the term modulation. And then maybe moving over into those secretagogues, those growth hormone secretagogues, those peptides that cause our body to make more growth hormone and release more growth hormone, but is not actually exogenous growth hormone, so that we don't get into all those negative cost factors, but negative things that can occur with actual growth hormone, exogenous growth hormone. What is exogenous growth hormone? It's a syringe of growth hormone. Okay. And if you're on it too long, your body will stop producing it. It has some known side effects that could potentially cause a problem. Ridiculously expensive, hard for doctors to write legally. But at the end of the day, we have these growth hormone secretagogues that patients and providers can use that do a really good job of keeping that negative feedback intact, so we don't suppress our production, but yet get those positive benefits of growth hormone production, which is, less inflammation, sleeping better, skin looking better, more fat burning, more muscle building. I call those shotgun peptides. I think it was Dr. Greg Jones's podcast, I've talked about it here, that he asked that great question at the end, all of his guests, of, if you're stuck on a desert island, what peptide are you bringing? And I always say a growth hormone secretagogue, because it does a little bit of everything. The truth is most patients don't need 7, 8, 9, 10 peptides. That's just overblown. Most of our well patients can survive and do and flourish on 1, 2, or 3 peptides. And of course, let's not forget the flavor of the day that we're always talking about, the GLP-1s. Okay, those patients that do need to lose that visceral fat or do have insulin resistance, because you got insulin resistance, you're going to have visceral fat. But have visceral fat and insulin resistance, those patients really need those GLP-1s. Let's not forget those are peptides. Okay, and really working on the brain function to decrease appetite, increase fullness, making weight loss actually kind of fun, not actually like painful. Most of my patients that come in, once they adapt fast, I'm like, man, if you're on a GLP-1, fasting's a piece of cake because you're not hungry. So then it's just habit, like breaking habits. But that's what I love about GLP-1s, is it makes breaking habits not so damn painful. I mean, I've said on this podcast again, how do most people lose weight? They decide on Sunday they're going to start on Monday. So they gorge themselves on Sunday because they have this, I got to start tomorrow, which then has this counter effect of making you really hungry the next day. And they've given up by 2:00 in the afternoon, and they're in the pantry, eating too much. And, by Tuesday, Wednesday, we flat given up. I'm like, we'll try it again next week. that's where these GLP-1s are amazing. You know, I'm so tired of hearing on social media these negative myths about GLP-1s. They're so amazing. They do such great things. They really are. If we could take away some of the minimal side effects, we would literally have miracle products on our hands. I still think they probably are. So GLP-1s, and I mean, and we can obviously take it from there, but that's kind of the base of what usually we start most of our wellness patients at.
I think there's a lot of headwinds that everyone's fighting when they're wanting to change their lifestyle, wanting to eat better, wanting to sleep better. We walk through our life and there's so much coming at us to get some Doritos or that, you know, it's Wendy new commercial and all these things that are programming in us and tempting us. And that GLP-1 is like getting out of the wind, and it lets you kind of ignore that, and it gives you a little momentum because it's not just changing the way you eat, it's changing the way you think. And you need some time for your brain to catch up with what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, agreed. And if I could just get on my soapbox for a split second, I won't take too long. You know, one thing we're hearing a lot these days is as GLP-1s become more popular, and I think that's great, by the way. I think accessibility is awesome. And there are some cut rate programs that are out there. And that's fine if that's what patients want to do. You know, I hate to say this, I don't want to sound big-headed, but then they're probably not patients for us. But what's happening in these cut rate programs is I don't think the quality of the product they're getting is very good. That's the first thing. These are compounded products, and not all compounded products are the same. But B, they're getting no form of education. They're not being taught how to break these habits, how to change their life, how to mix things in to keep this weight loss going, how to truly be successful. They're being given a prescription. Here's your semaglutide, and off you go. You know, I had a patient, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that kind of stuck out to me. And I usually spend an hour with my new weight loss patients, and I go over as many things as I can. And then I say, we're going to layer it every time you come in. We're going to pick up where we left off and keep running the ball down the field. And I spent an hour with her, and she was in someone else's weight loss program for 9 months on a GLP-1. And she quit the program because she lost a little bit of weight, but like 8 pounds in like 9 months. And, you know, and she was like, oh my God, you know, I did 9 visits at this place, and in 1 hour, you taught me more than probably times 10 that I ever learned in that program. And I'm not saying that to like be big headed about that. I'm trying to say that there is something to be said about programs like we have and how we're truly helping our patients and educating our patients. This is not a prescription mill. That is not what we are. We're about education. We're about helping our patients. We don't claim to be the cheapest clinic in town, nor will we ever be. And that's because we know that how much time we put into our patients, and patients that come in, then they get it. Once they see us, they're like, oh my gosh. So we tell those patients that are kind of looking at those, I hate to say it, but those kind of lower end programs, I'm like, we'll be here when or if you need us. And they end up coming back in a few months because then they realize, well, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? I thought GLP-1s fix everything. Well, they're awesome, but you got to have a provider that knows how to use them properly, how to titrate them properly, and also guide you through the process properly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the main thing about this audience here is they want to take ownership. They understand they're going to make a lifestyle change, and they're going to use data and labs and your consulting, and then they're going to be able to take certain supplements or whatever those things that you might prescribe. Mm-hmm. And that creates a program, not an easy button, not just this one little pill and everything's good. That's the big difference.
Yeah, to be real honest, we're not even looking for those patients. And I don't mean to be brash. I know it comes across brash, but I used to always really fear those type, like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that patient. Like now it's like, hey, we need patients that buy into what we do, that maybe have tried other things and it hasn't worked, you know, and then to realize it's not that easy. And there's going to be a few patients that have success that other way. You know, they're just, everything's metabolically right for them, but most people aren't. And that's the only thing that bugs me about this now is that there's so many people doing them and they have no real clue of what they're doing, but that's okay. Like I say, even with hormones and everything, it takes everybody to make the world go round.
That's right. So you can learn more at the research clinic. What's the best way to connect? Let's say that I'm committed to changing my lifestyle. I would like someone to help consult me, use some labs, and know what my options are. How do I go about it?
I'd say 3 ways. If you're local, you're welcome to stop in. And believe it or not, we have a lot of patients that do that. They know where we're at and they just stop in. And my staff is very courteous and would be more than happy to do that. You're also welcome to call us. Our phone number's on our website, or you can go to the website and, click on the consultation button and go that route. So 3 different ways. Whatever works best for the patient is what we want them to do.
All right. And that's the researchclinic.com. Dr. Kris, any last comment before I roll our little cute outro?
No, I just like everybody maybe to get out. I'm not into New Year's resolutions. It's not my thing, but I like the new year to reset our minds. And I'm doing the same thing. I actually kind of waited to February 1st because January was crazy, but I'm resetting my own health this month and working on some things. So let's just get our butts moving and get active and do those things we need to do to get healthier.
All right, here we go. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris Podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.drkris.life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris Podcast.